Saints, but I got to ask you out the gate. The big news today is Eric Gilbert. Mike, has this been one of the craziest things you've covered in sports?
It's one of the craziest things I've covered in recruiting. I'll put it to you that. Man, listen, a few weeks back, I wrote this that I didn't think Gilbert would come back. I thought Eric would leave. And it's just been one process after another. And listen, he's a unicorn player. I mean, athletically, he's that. I've never seen anybody at LSU at tight end with that type size, speed, length, to be able to catch a football the way he could. But you had other issues. And so, and I understand why Ed would have took him back. And he told me, listen, I would take him back in a heartbeat. But again, he's got to want to be all in. And so, when I didn't see any indication of that, to me, that led me to believe he wasn't going to return. Mm-hmm. And I doing numerous shows. I mean, it's one of the first questions you get: what's going to happen with Eric Gilbert? And my thing is, I don't think he's coming back. I'd be shocked if he would have. And so, was what it was, and you just move on now. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. He had the cards in his hand, and so he had that play card that he could throw down, and decides to go to Georgia. And so, Blake, I think what we're looking at today is something that I've never covered or anybody else, and that is SEC players transferring inside the SEC. Mm-hmm. It has not happened, but they're going to amend that rule, and like the other conferences in college football, where how big a difference that's going to make in this league. Okay, Alabama needs a linebacker. They go out and get Tennessee's linebacker. LSU needed safety help. And you got Major Burns to come back to Louisiana. And, now you got him, leaving Nicholls State, with Pig Cage leaving to come to LSU on a scholarship situation, which will be set up for next year. And he's a really good player too. I saw him in high school play a lot. Watched him at Nicholls, watched every game last year. Man, he came in there and he made an impact. Right. He's not the biggest cat around, but man, he is a scrappy guy, smart, instinctive, great coming off the edge as a blitzer. And for not being a big safety, I was surprised how well he tackled in the open field. And that is something today, it's worth its weight in gold. So it's new. We're walking in new grounds today with guys being able to go inside the conference, just like we saw TJ transfer to Auburn. And that wasn't the case in the past. You weren't going to be able to do it. But now, they're going to amend that rule and what it does for some teams that will go cherry picking.
Mike, it's an interesting point that you bring up in reference to kids transferring in the SEC. It's going to be really interesting to see how the SEC mends that, because I know that they don't want that, because, Mike, it's going to be tampering a lot too. But you talked about looking forward and moving forward with LSU, so let's do that. Mike, I don't know how else to say it, and I'm not saying this LSU team's going to the playoff. It's not what I'm saying. But the experience this team has with 30-plus starters or 30-plus guys that have an SEC start or have started against the SEC, like guys like Mike Jones. Do you think this experience carries this team a long way, and could LSU find themselves in the Alabama week or maybe at the end of the season looking for a playoff spot at the end of the year?
I think the most critical game is game one. Mm-hmm. LSU is a better football team than UCLA. They are more talented than UCLA, a more physical football team than UCLA. But look what happened to lead to some of the things that happened last year on defense, and how quickly all that can be amended, because you play in UCLA and Chip Kelly. Okay, guess what? I know Chip's going to throw it. I mean, he has watched that film. He hasn't been blinded by it, and he's going to attack No, he's going to attack that
Right.
area.
Right.
Now, I think one of the things, and talking to Coach O about this, right at the start of the year, he had high hopes that, listen, we got an 8-9 man front defensive line wise that we think we can get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And I think that's the big part of today's defenses. This is not watching TV when you were a kid. This ain't your daddy's defense or your grandpa's defense. You're going to give up yardage. But,
right.
You got to stop them from scoring touchdowns and force them to kick a field goal and get turnovers. And that all leads to what you can do up front. And you couldn't be more confused than what you were a year ago in the secondary. I mean, it seemingly every play that was a mental gaffe one way or another. So that first game to me is so critical because of how the schedule sets up for you. If you can win there and gain some confidence, not momentum, because momentum lasts until you play the next game and they knock you in the teeth.
Right.
But confidence in what you're doing. And, okay, you playing early on now, Auburn team with a new head coach, a new scheme offensively. They've, to me, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that their best teams are when they could run the ball.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Gus, I have no idea what he was doing. Man, he got a big stud in the backfield, and that ball ain't heavy. All of a sudden, give him that football 25, 28 times a game.
Right.
And, you're playing Florida, and, okay, you lose Kyle Trask, who was a really good player. And Pitts, even though you didn't see him last year, but you've seen him in the past, a first-round pick wide receiver in Tony, another guy that goes into the NFL. You lost a couple of linemen. Defensively, man, they seem confused. When you watch tape of them, coaches tape, and watch how out of position they were so many times, almost the entire secondary is gone with the exception of one guy who's really good. And can they get a pass rush? Man, you could roll this, with some confidence. Now, that Kentucky game is interesting because, listen, they do things a little bit differently there. They sort of stick you the middle finger and say, hey, listen, we're going to run the ball, and I dare you to stop it. I dare you to stop it. And so it's a physical game when you play Kentucky. They not a huge threat throwing the football, haven't been for years. And so I see where you're going with this, and you are absolutely right. And I did a show a couple of weeks ago with Bison, and one of the things we brought up there was the opportunity here. If you can stay healthy and win that game and gain you some confidence on defense, because I think this whole season is going to be built around how much better can you be on defense. I think offensively, you're going to be fine. You got to run the ball better, because I think in today's game, it's not about pounding the rock 25, 30 times, but you got to run it when you need to and have to.
Right.
And last year, every game, virtually, you were getting met in the backfield by defensive linemen. And your offensive line was as soft as cotton. So you can say, okay, we're bringing all them guys back. Well, and, they didn't jump out at you as being this real physical unit. And so that to me is the key offensively. I think no matter what happens at quarterback, if it's Miles or if it's Max, and I think a couple of the young receivers, freshman receivers, will make an impact. That's a position where we have seen in college football a freshman come in and he can play. I think 7-on-7's changed the world. Pete Jenkins always sort of teases me about this. He said, when you wrote that article 5 years ago about what you saw at our camps, because we have 3 major camps here on the Bayou, and when they would blow that whistle and they would say, okay, defensive linemen go over here, inside players here, outside players there. Man, I ain't never had to worry. Them guys just walk around me. I mean, it was just a handful.
Right.
But when they said receivers, go over here, man, I got out of the way because it looked as though, if we had 400 young men, 150 of them were playing receiver or flex tight end. And that was 5 years ago. Now it's really changed the world on what's happened at LSU, certainly with Justin and Jamar and Terrace Marshall and, you got another budding young superstar in your hands with Keishon Butte. Man, you can have a couple of these freshman wideouts make a difference. I really believe that. And I'm interested, too, they want to get the ball to the tight end, okay? Mm-hmm. They have not found the guy that could take Clyde Edwards-Helaire's place as a receiver coming out of the backfield. Clyde was great route runner, and man, he caught the ball so cleanly. And then when he got him in open field, yeah, man, you better grab him quick because you got one shot,
right?
Because he's spinning and he's taking off. None of those guys have stepped up to the plate. So my thing is that there's got to be a tight end here, and we'll see what happens with Cole, who's a huge target guy. You're talking about a 6'6" tight end, but Besh at tight end as a flex tight end. Because you watch him, he's going to be a physical mismatch for some defenders downfield. And now, and talking to Coach O about this, he told me, he said, Mike, we in base defense probably 15 to 18% of the plays. Mm-hmm. Everything else is nickel and dime. So, man, if I can spread you out and you got to cover, I'm interested in how the young freshman can develop Bud Besh, because I think he's a weapon, especially red zone, short yardage, where it's 3rd and 6 and he gets you to 8 yards.
Mm-hmm. Mike, something that's interesting, and you talk about these young wide receivers, and I'm going to ask you this because I think it's interesting. When I watch a guy by the name, a guy like Jay Ward, I watched the Florida film a couple of weeks ago, and he's running with guys down the field, guys by the name of Kadarius Toney going one-on-one in man coverage, batting down balls, and doing a lot of things. I think he's going to be an explosive player. You talked about some of these young wide receivers, Jack Besh. Is there one player on this team, and we've had a lot of people inside of our chat asking, #AskMike, so anybody wants to ask, go ahead. Mike, is there one player on this LSU team that you just think is going to emerge? And if so, what position group or what player do you think is going to be that guy that's going to emerge this year for LSU?
I think it's Ali Gay up front. Wow. Now, we saw flashes of it a year ago. But, Blake, you walk up to him and you say, that's what a defensive end's supposed to look like.
Right.
I mean, man, and he's this tall, lengthy guy, and his takeoff is so quick. And he's getting better as a technician in his ability to use his arms and his hands. Come on, because in high school or in JUCO, you beating guys with your athleticism, your speed. Okay, now you're going to the major colleges. There are moves and counter moves you have to make to get off of a block. And I think Ali's the guy that he can be special. All I know is if there's an NFL scout watching, his eyes are glued to Ali Gay because in this league and, in college football and the pros, pass rushers are gold, absolute gold. The other guy certainly up front, and I laugh about it and he laughs about it too, is Mason Smith.
Right.
Mason's a guy that I'll tell you the whole story. 3 years ago, he was coming in as a sophomore. And there's a lady lawyer in Houma that I know really well, and her son had played Terrebonne early. and she tells me, "Hey, listen, there's a guy at Terrebonne, a really big guy. His last name is Mason." And, it didn't ring a bell to me, okay. So I go to a Terrebonne game, and, I go talk to Gary, and I tell him, you got a defensive lineman here, big defensive lineman. His last name's Mason. And he looks at me and said, "Oh, no." He said, "His first name's Mason." And if you old enough, you would get this. That was a TV show years back. Marlo Thomas played that girl.
Mm-hmm.
And he pointed and he said, "He's that guy." And I say, "You got to be kidding me." He said he's not even 15 years old yet. I took a look and I was like, wait a minute. Whoa. So, I walked up to him, and he's like Clark Kent. He was wearing the glasses, and he stuck his hand out, man, and I could tell, man, he had some mitts on him. And he said, "Man, I listen to you all the time. I read about it, man." And so he was, great. And I watched him in the game. His pass rush skills caught me right off the bat. And I'd asked him, "How many scholarships you have?" And he said, "Probably 5 or 6." I said, "Okay." Now, he played that game, and I think it was the following week. I called Coach O and I said, "Listen, they got a guy here at Terrebonne." He said, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Mason Smith." Okay. Well, but next time I see Mason, he don't have 5 or 6 scholarships. He's got 25 or 26 scholarships. Because I wrote the article and I was like, wow. And, I was getting phone calls from people in some of the different talent deals about, I've never heard of this guy before.
Mm-hmm.
How good it really is. I was like, man, all I know one thing, they ain't got a lot of guys I've seen here on the Bayou that can run like him for a big man.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen film, and we went there and filmed him at Camp Mula, and Ernest Harvey has his place there. And he's not the best big man football player I've ever seen on the Bayou. That goes to Eric Andelsek.
Right.
And Eric was a monster player on both sides of the football. But man, Mason, his ability to comprehend what's being thrown at him and use it. But man, he's going to make an impact, I think, pretty quickly as an interior pass rusher, which, I work with 5 former NFL quarterbacks weekly, and they all tell you the same thing. I hate it. I don't want nobody in my face, because you can't step up in the pocket and get in the launch pad if you got a guy right there. Right. You got to either move left or right, or you got to move backwards. And I'm interested in McLaughlin at corner, because that is a position where if everybody's healthy, Stingley, Eli Ricks, looks as though Cardell would be the nickel guy, but you need 4. And he had a terrific spring.
He sure did.
If anybody watched the spring game, he was like in somebody's hip pocket every play. And he is really, he's built like, if you say prototype LSU corner, he's it.
Right. And
so those 3 guys, Ali as a senior, Mason certainly as a freshman, and McLaughlin as a sophomore. I'm interested in that. The one area that I'm probably most interested in is how well your linebackers can cover. Because I think that's an area that's so difficult today. It's the hardest position to find to have a linebacker, because you're stuck, okay, with these RPOs, and, you can stick that ball in the belly of a running back. So your first instinct as a linebacker is it's a running play. So I'm headed up the field. You know what happens? He pulls that ball out and throws the ball right over the top of you. Okay, it's 3rd and 7. Okay, we gonna play coverage. Okay, so you all spread out. You're in dime coverage. The linebacker's there. Your instinct is, okay, they're gonna throw it. You're putting it in reverse. You know what they do? They hand it off to a big damn running back, and they run the football.
Right.
He gets through that first wave, he's scot-free. Just because, and he's up against a 190-pound corner. a 210-pound linebacker, how well Jones can play. Now, because he's been used mostly in that nickel position as a cover guy. Can Damone Clark turn potential into production? Micah Baskerville, I thought, played really well late last year.
Right.
I thought he was the best of the linebackers. I thought he played better than Jabril late. And, you know, he had some great issues he's got to get. So how that all sort of meshes together, because we're seeing this new breed of linebacker, of part safety, part linebacker, and you got to cover, because you know what? You run out of downs if you can only play the run.
Right.
You play first down, get off the field. Hey, you got to get off. You know, it's that old Matt Millen line. Hey, you know, I didn't retire. I ran out of downs. You know, like you said, when I first got in the league, I was playing 3 downs, and it got down to 2 downs, and I was 1 down, and then, like you said, I just ran out of downs. And so, but that's the world we living in, Blake. And so I think, again, we going right back to the crux of the matter here is how much better can this defense be? Can they understand and grasp things quickly in what's going on? And, you know, I've known Durante now a long time. We go back to when he was at Nicholls State, when he was an assistant. And so, you know, and he's bounced around. So he's picked up a lot of different things along the way. And so, man, that first game to me is huge, because if you come out of there and you've played well defensively, you win that game, you could spring this into a lot of wins because of confidence.
Right.
And you're going to get good play out of your quarterback position. Can you run the football is going to be the big thing, because I do think offensively, if there's a question mark, is you got to be a more physical team running the ball and give your backs an opportunity. And I don't believe in this running back by committee stuff. I've made my point about that. I think you got to have multiple backs, but I think you got to have one bell cow guy. You got to have one guy that you hang your hat on as a runner. And you know, it worked with Clyde, didn't it? Man, it worked great. Right. So my thing about it is you got to find that back and say, hey, listen, you my guy, and you carrying the load, and we're going to give you a break now and then, but you the guy that I'm counting on to make this work offensively.
Mike, very quickly, you know, it's funny. We had a former LSU O lineman on. The AYS people are going to know who it's coming from, but I'm not going to mention his name. He said when Clyde wasn't in the game in 19, he grabbed Joe Burrow grabbed one of those freshman backs, throw him on the sideline, says, "Go tell Clyde he needs to cut his ass back in here." Just because.
Well, listen, I believe that. Listen, Blake, here's the craziest thing. Early in the season, and doing a lot of talk show radio and even television, people, why aren't they playing the 2 freshman backs more?
Right.
Now, after about the 3rd game, those calls stopped. And I couldn't find those people today with GPS. None of them.
Right.
None of them want to admit that they were bitching that, okay, we need to see the freshman. No, the best guy was Clyde, and he showed it weekly. And I think one of the things that, and Joe Burrow told me this, that really I had great confidence in Clyde in, he could pick up that interior blitz.
Right.
Texas
was
the
biggest
he said at the last minute, he said, all of a sudden you saw that little guy get in there, and he said, listen, the block was almost like if you like got a wheelbarrow and flipped the guy. He was sort of flipping that guy over. But he said, listen, you know, he gave me time to throw. And, you know, in talking to even Deuce McAllister about this, Deuce was like, man, Mike, that's the biggest thing. These guys got to, you know how to run the ball. And he said, most guys can catch the ball pretty well coming out of the backfield. But he said, not, you know, if you're a star back in high school, how many times you blocking? Very few.
Right.
You know, you're not doing a lot of that. So that's new to you. And it's not that you can't do it. is you got to understand who you got to catch. So it's a mental thing too. So I understand why Joe was saying, "Hey, listen, Clyde, you better get back on that field."
Oh, Mike, it was the funniest thing ever. Just hearing him talk off. Mike, a couple more questions for you. I greatly appreciate you joining the show. Mike Detillier.com, SaintsReport.com. I want to move very quickly to I want to get into some Saints. We'll have to bring you back on to talk that. But I saw something today about the Manning Passing Academy. All the great quarterbacks that are coming in. Miles Brennan and Max Johnson's on that list. Mike, is this the most anticipated quarterback competition? And I know that we've had Rohan and Booty in there from a while ago, but is this not one of the biggest quarterback competitions that LSU, maybe the nation, has right now that we've seen in a long time?
It's been a long time, really has. And Archie and I talked about this a couple of weeks back. We had an event to honor Frank Monica, who's retiring from St. Charles Catholic. God bless him. One of the great guys in this business and just an unbelievable coach. And Frank and I have known one another for over 40 years. So Archie was telling me, he said, Mike, I'm doing something I've never done before. And I said, what's that? He said, I got two quarterbacks from the same school. Mm-hmm. And he gave me that look, and I said, you don't have to go no farther. He said, I talked to Coach O, and I told him, I said, Coach, who do you want to send? He said, I want both of them there. Mm-hmm. It has never happened.
Wow.
Never happened in the 25 years of Manning. Now, Well Narcisse came in a few years back and just threw him to Thursday and left. In 2019, Joe was there, and that's when, he shocked the world, saying, I'm telling all of y'all that can hear me, all of y'all, we're gonna average 40 points a game scoring. Mm-hmm. And that was this audible gasp of where are you transferring to now? And so when he walks out and I see him, he had told me, he said, listen, he said, this afternoon, he said, y'all doing the show here? I said, yeah. I said, we'll be doing WWL radio here. And he's like, who's coming this evening and throw? I said, no. He said, Miles Brennan. Uh-huh. And Miles threw right in front of us. And he was there. Coach O had talked to had Archie and talked to him about having Miles come there, talk to Eli and Peyton, and just sort of go through things and what a young quarterback goes through. But he was only there for one session and out. This is the first time in the 25 years of Manning there are two quarterbacks, same school. So that tells me a lot right there. Archie would never really want to do that because, it kind of puts both of them, in an awkward position. Mm-hmm. Because media is going to be there to question them about competition, everything else. And, they hear about it every chance they get. But now you're on a really big stage here to do that. And so, it's a huge competition between the two. And so it's interesting battle. And I think if Miles is healthy, I think he is leading by a little bit. Mm-hmm. But Blake, it's close. Man, Max is, if Miles turns around, he can feel that breath of Max right there. And so it's going to be interesting how you handle that. I know Ed went through this before. He was not the head coach, but at USC, that was quite a battle between Matt Leinart and Matt Castle one year.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being the game they played at Auburn. And, they tanned Auburn's backside but good that day. And Leinart became Leinart, just an unbelievable college quarterback. But that was a real tight competition. And Pete let that get to the bitter days. I mean, I'm not sure it wasn't the Wednesday or the Thursday before the Saturday game that he made the decision to go with Leinart. And it was that close. And, Leinart, once he got in the game, then you saw he was the guy. Nothing against Matt Castle. He went on to play in the NFL a number of years, but, it's quite a battle. We have not seen that before. And I got LSU fans, and God, just because, I grew up with, with the head coach, their deal is, man, this is going to cause a lot of controversy. I was like, wait. For years, you were complaining that we didn't have enough quarterbacking talent. Now you complaining that you got too much.
Right.
So I would tell him the line Hank worked for us at WWL for a while. He took my Ditka's place in the casino shows, and he'd always call me by. He said, "By, let me tell you something. I never worried about not having enough talent. I'm all, man, when I got talent, I'm happy." He said, when I'm upset when I don't have it.
Right.
And so, man, is that the biggest? And it's going to be a huge story because of how the season ended with Max and how it ended with Miles. But wouldn't you rather have that competition than not have one?
I certainly would. And Mike, inquisiting, very big minds. It might just be me, but when you say that, okay, and I'm not trying to get. I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm just going to throw this out here and get your thought on this. Archie and Ed obviously have a seriously good connection. Do you think because of that connection, he has a grandson named Arch, you start throwing in that connection between the two and how they've done these things in the past. This is the first time they're doing it. Do you think that this is something that we should keep our eyes on with Arch moving forward as a recruit now that he's saying, "Hey, Ed, do you want both?" And he lets him come in. Do you think that that's something interesting in the development on what could happen with Arch?
I think it's a long shot at best that Arch Manning go with LSU.
Okay. Well,
look, I'm just telling you. Listen, you got to say the right things and to the right reporters, okay? But there's some dynamics here that it would be shocking to me if Arch end up at LSU. Now, again, his teammates are going there, and God bless them. Bo Bordelon, I know his dad been very, very well. His uncle Boise. My dad worked for Bollinger Shipyard as a CPA for almost 42 years. It was like 41 and a half years. So I know the Bollingers and the Bordelons. And I tell you what, he got a little brother, Brett. Man, Blake, he might be the better of the two.
That's what I keep hearing, Mike.
No. Let me tell you, Bo is a guy. Bo plays tackle, but I think he's going to play inside. He's going to be a center in college football. But Brett is a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, and I think that's going to be interesting because we're having the Louisiana line camp here at the end of the month, and Brett is going to be one of the guys participating at the Louisiana line camp. And guess who's his tag team partner?
Tell me.
Hyde Manning, the younger brother of Arch.
Right.
And so when we got the papers in, it was like, okay, this is interesting. And so I got to talk to Archie about it. And he's like, Mike, man, because, I know Arch a little bit, but, Hyde was a little bit younger. He said, he's a lot like Cooper. He said, man, he's got the gift of gab. And he said, I don't know how much bigger he's going to be, but he said, I finally got me a lineman. And so that's going to be interesting. Now, he's just going to be a freshman, and he's going to be a backup center. But that there's going to be a picture somewhere of Manning snapping the ball to Manning.
Absolutely.
And so both those guys, excuse me, are going to be here at Louisiana line camp. And, man, it's just, it's just one of those deals where I think that it would be surprising to me if Arch ended up at LSU. He's got a ton of suitors from across the country. If you ask me who was a front runner, I'm going to say, and I've said this now for over, I think it's Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look back at the history of Dabo at Clemson and Taj Boyd, Deshaun Watson, Trevor, DJ being the first overall pick.
Right.
and now DJ.
Right.
Okay, and so you got that. Dabo and Archie have known each other for years. That's a close connection there. It's still basically a Southern team. I think Texas has put a lot of heat because of Sark and for what he's done in developing quarterbacks, not only at Alabama, but if you look back at what he did with Jake Locker at Washington, what he did at USC, and before he had some personal issues, man, he's a great quarterback mentor, really, really was. And Notre Dame now, and talking to Archie about this, man, they've really turned it up. So, he's going to be a national recruit. But to answer your question, I would be surprised if he ended up at LSU. Now, it's quite a consolation prize, the number 2 guy, and that's Eli from Zachary.
Mm-hmm. Holstein. Right. Man, is he impressive? And he's a big young man, too, and he's got a rifle. But his delivery, I was telling this to somebody today. I was talking to Julie Boudouin about this, and I was like, if I close my eyes and I didn't see Burt Jones as a high school player, but I saw him at LSU. That delivery and all is a lot like Burt. And he's bigger today than Burt was. Right.
And so, man, and you think about 2023, I think you could have 6 to 7 Division I quarterbacks from the state of Louisiana.
That's unreal. That's just
unreal. Never happened before. And so it'll be interesting to see how LSU sort of juggles this in recruiting, because you're going to be Jimbo Fisher told me this last year. He said, Mike, what's going to happen? A lot was happening at LSU today. You're going to have a veteran quarterback, and the 2 backups are going to be freshmen. And he said, so it changes your recruiting, because that guy you think's coming in as a sophomore, and he sees he's got 2 freshmen behind him. His deal is, hey, guys, it's been fun. I'm out. Mm-hmm. And so he said, listen, what happened at LSU last year, I think is going to be more of the norm than what a lot of people would want to think. You're not going to have a Mac Jones situation. Right. Okay, that sort of waited around and then he got his chance. I think that is going to change how you think about recruiting, short term and long term. Because what happens if you, let's say Miles leaves after this year and turns pro, okay, and you would have Max. Oh, who's your backup? Okay, Garrett.
Right.
And you got Jamie Howard coming in. But, one thing with quarterbacks, they know the guy behind them. If he's pretty good, man, I might be better off somewhere else. So, Blake, I'm just telling you, I think that is going to change some mindsets, and you're going to have to be open to maybe keeping that scholarship open to grab you a transfer or recruit 2 quarterbacks every year.
Mike, I could sit here and talk to you for days about it, but I think you're right. I mean, and thank God we got Ed Orgeron to recruit it, because he's had success in doing this. But I think it's going to be very interesting. Mike D, you've been fantastic. I promise you, next time you're on, we'll talk some Saints. But it's been a while since we talked to you, and I know you're going to have a long summer. Tell all the great people where they can find you. I know where they can, but tell them again where they can find all your great stuff.
You can, best thing, go on MikeDetillier.com. I'm on the Saints News Network and write for them along with SaintsReport.com. But got a lot of LSU stuff because, listen, we all kind of connect the dots. Today, if it's
right.
High school football, college, pros, it's all connected dots. And so that's the best way to reach. And listen, I'll tell you a quick story about Ed.
Go ahead.
He ends speeches today when he we haven't had a lot, but he'll end it today. And he said, man, I thank God every time I pull into that driveway, the head coach at LSU. I thank him, man, for giving me this day, man, to come in here and to be the head coach at LSU. And he said, he said, I'm like you, Mike. He said, man, I got that radio turned up, man. I'm listening to the radio. He said, I turned that radio down. I stopped the car. I stopped my truck. And he said, before I get out, I said, oh, God, one more thing. You got another Joe Burrow. Send him to LSU.
I mean, that's got to be the prayer, right? Like we're calling on St. Mary on that one, right, Mike? Like there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and Joe changed the world, brother. Changed the world.
Absolutely. Mike D, thank you as always, my friend. You have a good night.
Brother.
We'll
Appreciate
talk soon. That is Mike Detillier. Always just so great in what he does.